Hey guys, I think PC Guy here, and I have something to show you that might be interesting because it is the first video of this sort that I will be able to do. So for the first time, I will be able to actually run a comparison between pieces of hardware, like let's say some nice and new and bubbly graphics cards. So that will be a first. I will be doing some benchmarks on this, comparing it to my own current graphics cards, which is a 960 GTX 960. I know it's not the fairest comparison, being 2 generations over, but then people will be able to have an idea of how much of an upgrade they will be getting if they go from a similar graphics card to 1660 Ti. Now, this is the one isn't for me. This time it's the waifu that's getting lucky. So she'll actually be enjoying a new graphics card that she doesn't even know she's getting yet. It's going to be a surprise. It's actually going to be better than mine. So I'm not going to do the unboxing just yet. I'll do it after. I'll let her, open it herself first, and then I will steal it for a couple of days, obviously. To actually run the benchmarks and tests, and then I'll give it back to her, obviously. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of an upgrade for her. She's running on a 750 Ti, so that's kind of needing some replacement. And this was ideal since she all she games on is 1080p 60 Hz, so it's going to be perfect and more than enough to keep her going. So I'll be back soon with the next clip after her actual getting it. For some quality unboxing, I'll just let you see real quick. Uh, I've actually obviously let the recipient of the graphics card open it first, so I already saw it, and there's not a whole lot to see. It's not the most fancy of packages, as you can see. This is what you can expect when you get the 1660 Ti. Little instruction manual, a CD with drivers, which you'll probably get online anyway from Nvidia, an MSI little card, and then the card itself, which I will let you see before I actually give it a try. It's like a little foam packaging in there, and then the card itself is packaged in this little anti-static bag, which I will open, open, and get the card out of it. So yeah, as you can see, it has a nice model, nice design, I would say. I like it. I'll probably go for a blue and white build when I build her a desk like mine. Um, it only has DisplayPort and HDMI connectors, as you can see, so you have to make sure that your monitor supports one of those two. I kind of like feels and seems sturdy enough, to be honest. The quality of the cooler and all of that stuff. It doesn't seem to be like completely cheap stuff either. So there's a certain quality here. There is a back plate that not all graphics cards have to keep the structural integrity, let's say. When it's hanging like this on your motherboard, it could, begin to sag, and the back plate does help it to, prevent that. So now, yeah, that said, I will be putting this card in on my PC to test it first, to make some benchmarks, compare the performance in some games, and I will let you guys see the result. Now the card is in, and I will give you guys some comparisons between the card and the 960. Obviously, this one will win by a landslide. We're already expecting that. But what we really are interested in seeing here is by how much will you win? How much more performance will you get by replacing, in this case, a GTX 960 by a 1660 Ti? This will let you see if it's worth it, if it's worth spending your money on that. I'll give my say in in terms of price versus performance when we're done with the results. And yeah, it won't be a surprise that the 1660 Ti is going to win in pretty much every scenario. But like I said, let's see exactly by how much. Since I don't have an actual benchmarking table, I will be using my own PC as the baseline comparison, so to speak. Now, the rest of the specs, if you are not familiar from watching other videos yet, I'm running on a Maximus 11 Hero motherboard with i7 9700K overclocked at 5.1 GHz all cores. The RAM is a G-Skill Trident ZRGB with 3.6K megahertz at CL17, and the games will be running either from SSD in a couple of cases, in other cases from a 7.2K RPM hard drive, although that shouldn't really matter all that much in terms of the FPS that are going to be reported. What matters is that the games and benchmarks that I'll be doing are going to have the same settings from one graphics card to the other. So if it's on Ultra when I'm trying one, it's going to be on Ultra when I'm trying the other. If it's installed on the SSD when I'm trying on one card, it is also on the SSD try when it's being tested on the other card. Language is difficult sometimes. So this is what matters when benchmarking. That the circumstances are the same and that only one of the variables is different. In any case, let's go for the results, and I will leave the whole technicalities for perhaps another video. We shall see. As we kind of expected, the results are very one-sided towards the 1660 Ti, which is not crazy because it's 2 generations newer and there's a Ti version on top of it. In any case, we don't see a lot of improvement in Cinebench, although 11% is always a boost, but a benchmark is a benchmark anyway. On 3D Mark times Pi, we see a 177% performance increase with a score going almost double of what the 960 shows. On Firestrike, the result is less of an improvement, although it is more than double. It is still more than double of the result of the 960 with an 118% upgrade. Same story for Aztec Ruins on high and normal. We have results in the improvement range of 145 or 152%, which means that it's still more than twice as fast as the 960, which is quite a good, I would say, quite a good result considering that the price, as far as launch goes, is not that different, and so I would consider it quite satisfactory. On superposition for Muningen high and medium, we see results around 165% and 156% higher than the 960. I did not feel the need to test the extreme or ultra preset from superposition because while testing high, the GTX 960 was already showing me artifacts, most likely because of having low VRAM. It was only a 2 GB model, so that's not really nothing to write home about. So I did not feel the need to even test the highest setting on superposition because it would most likely just result in errors. In any case, as you can see, the results across the board are quite evident in pretty much every benchmark that tests your GPU. The 1660 Ti is performing more than double of what the 960 is, in some cases close to 3 times as fast. So as far as benchmark goes, that is quite satisfactory. As far as temperatures go, the highest temperature we encountered during all the testing that we did on the 1660 Ti was 60 degrees, while on the 960 we encountered temperatures going all the way up to 68 degrees. So even cooling wise, even though the card runs a lot faster, obviously, as we saw, it runs also a lot cooler. Probably because the 960 Ti, 960 that I had was a single fan design, which is also quite a few years old, so there might be some wear and tear somewhere there, as opposed to the dual fan design that this car now has, as well as some improvements in the cooling system, obviously. And because benchmarks are very nice in theory, but we all want to know real life performance, let's test some gaming. As far as gaming performance goes, I tested a number of games that I had available to me. Obviously, they might not be the best games for testing, but it's what I had. but we'll see what it goes. First of all, Diablo 3, I tested it on high ultra settings, so basically every setting maxed out in terms of graphic quality. It's not a very demanding game graphically, so as you can see, with the 960 I was hitting 104 1% lows and 137 average FPS, as opposed to the 1660 that was hitting 148 1% lows and average FPS of 275. Now, why are the 1% lows important in relation to the average FPS? This is just a general metric. It's the 1% lowest FPS that you get. You know, if you are measuring it altogether, all the FPS through a gaming session, 1% lows are going to be the 1% lowest FPS that you had. Why does this matter? Because if the FPS are not constant, if the lows are a lot lower than the average, you're gonna experience stuttering. It's gonna look like the game is kind of freezing on you, if you know what I mean. You know what I mean if you've been gaming for a while anyway. You know exactly what it is. So that is why I mentioned the 1% lows as well as the average FPS, which is the average, obviously, of the FPS that you're gonna get. In any case, Diablo is not a very graphical intensive title, as you can see, so you have quite a lot of FPS, but still, you can see that it is quite a sizable improvement over the 960. Same as World of Warcraft, it's a game that is very CPU bound. I tested it on a 20-man raid on the maximum preset, which is the level 10 graphic preset. Even there, you can see a very big increase in FPS, even though it's a game that doesn't scale very well with a graphics card. It's more CPU bound because there's a lot of stuff going on and a very long draw distance from outdoor open world kind of thing. But even there, you can see that the FPS more than double with the change in graphics card. This would allow you, for example, lower the graphics a little bit and achieve a higher refresh rate. If you wanted to go for example 144 hertz or whatever, you could lower the graphics. That would boost your FPS and you could achieve a higher refresh rate if you wanted. On Dying Light as well, you can see that the FPS have more than doubled from 47 average FPS up to 11 and 15. Yes, 115. Same story. You could drop the graphics a little bit and you would achieve 144 refresh rate, which is really perfect if you have a 144 hertz monitor. So there's also that option of dropping your graphics a little bit from the Ultra to achieve higher frame. On Heroes of the Storm on the Extreme preset, you don't see a massive improvement. This comes mostly from the fact that, again, it's not a very GPU intensive game. So the game is already running at crazy FPS, even with a weaker GPU, and it doesn't really benefit much from a strong GPU because it just does not have the graphical requirements for it. We've also tested other games. Before going for the next list of games, I will just say that I also tested Dark Souls 3 on maximum preset. We achieved with the 960 31% lows and 51 average FPS, and with the 1660 Ti we had 53 FPS on the lows and 60 on the average. We found this strange, and apparently it seems that Dark Souls 3 is FPS locked at 60, so it isn't a great game to test. So I'm not going to put the graphics here because what's the point? In any case, you can see an improvement. On to the next batch of games, which are a bit more relevant graphics-wise, as you will see. Wolfenstein 2, for example, the new Colossus. It is a shooter, fast-paced. You kind of want a good FPS to play that because otherwise you're going to be shot in the face and not even know where it's coming from. With the 960, you are hovering between around the 52 FPS with 36 lows, so you don't even break the 60 FPS mark. And at the same time, with the 1660 Ti, you are around 181 average FPS with the 1% lows and the 130. So you could even push the 144 refresh rate if you wanted, provided you lowered your settings a little bit from the Ultra that I tested it with. Witcher 3, huge open world, very detailed, very good graphics as well. AAA game that's not very old on ultra settings. With the 960, you're around the 35 FPS. With the 1660 Ti, you are at 81. Again, you could lower the graphics a little bit. You can always turn down, for example, the shadows, the anti-aliasing, the water reflections. That takes a huge toll on the GPU and on the FPS. And if you turn that down a little bit, you won't notice much of a graphics performance degradation, but you will see a good improvement in frame rate in case you want to push again higher refresh rates on your monitors if you have better monitors than 60 Hz. Doom 2016, same story as Wolfenstein. Ultra settings, very fast-paced shooter game. You really need that frame rate to be high so you can react properly. With the 960, you are running 45 FPS with 30 on the lows. With the 6060 Ti, you are at 156. So again, you could push the 144 refresh rate. With the lows being a bit on the lower side, 89, you would probably notice a few stutters here and there. But again, you can always downgrade the graphics a little bit and get better frame rate in compensation. With Apex Legends, I did not test it with the highest possible settings because the 960 just pretty much could not handle it, so the settings are not maxed out. Still, you can see the comparison that with the 960 I was hitting around 64 FPS with the settings I had, and with the 1660 Ti I was at 143 with 122 lows. So if you lower it just a little bit more, again you're at the 144 refresh rate for your high-end gaming monitor. Let it be said that all testing here is done on 1080p. So if you are going for higher resolutions, this card might provide lower frame rates than you are seeing here. So what is my verdict? The card is pretty amazing for the 1080p, that's no doubt. It can run anything you throw at it. Any modern game, AAA game, on ultra settings, you can run it at 1080p, 60 FPS, not a problem at all. Now, the question is, if you are going to be pushing higher refresh rates, then you might run into some issues depending on the title. It's still feasible to achieve that refresh rate if you lower your settings a little bit. So mostly you might be able to still hit that. On higher resolutions, like 1440 for example, you will hit the 60 FPS, also not an issue. But again, there you will not, I don't think you will be able to, on most games, hit the 144 mark for the refresh rate with most games with on ultra settings. Maybe if you lower settings on some games, you might be able to do it, but otherwise you can't. That said, is that a drawback that I'm like, you shouldn't buy the card because of that? Absolutely not. Why? Because this card, it's a beginner level, an entry level card. If you are going to be paying this little for a card, you probably are not going to be splurging on a high-end monitor with high refresh rate anyway. You're probably going to have a 60 Hz like most people do. So, and if you do have a better monitor, you probably are willing to spend more on a card, and in that aspect, you probably should get a better card like 270 or 260. So, that's not really something that I hold against this card. With a price that is hovering under the 300, depending on what manufacturer you buy it from, because there's no reference card. The MSRP S2 is 279, but you probably won't find it at that price. But it's usually, you can find models under the 300 easily. And for that price, comparing it to the 960 that which I use in this example, which sold at an MSRP of 200, although keep in mind that that was several years ago, so that there's inflation to take also into account, and probably our wages also got a bit raised. So there's also that to keep in mind, and it's also worth mentioning that this is a TI version. You cannot compare it directly to the 960, although that's what I did because it's the card that I had available to test it against. But it would be more fair to test the 960 against the 1660 non-TI that just launched next week. So also keeping that in mind when discussing the pricing of one card against the other and the performance and such, that it's not that even anyway. That said, if you own a 960 like I do, this would be a very worthwhile card to upgrade if you plan on staying 1080p 60 hertz. If you plan on getting a better monitor, either higher resolution or higher refresh rate or both, I would make the effort to save up a bit more and go to the 960 or 970 RTX cards for the performance increase that will allow you to achieve better frame rates on higher resolutions. That is also a bit of a discussion of, is it worth it saving a bit more and going for 1060? Yes, it is, but we're at a strange place in terms of the product ladder, so to speak. Which, if you have a 1060, is it worth saving up and going for a 1660 Ti? Yes, it is. If you have a 1660 Ti, is it worth saving a bit more and going for the RTX 2060? Yeah, it is. It's only a few dollars slash euros anyway, so why not? But while you're going up these little steps, and it's always worth going for the next one because it's always such a tiny difference. It's only 20, 30 euros or dollars between each model, and it's always worth it in terms of price per performance. But you start at the bottom, and it's always worth it going to the next one. And when you get to the top of that price bracket, it has always been worth it, but meanwhile you're probably 100-ish dollars or euros higher than you started off. And if you're on a budget, which most people that buy a card like this probably are, that makes quite a difference. So yeah, if you're going for, like I was saying, if you're going for 1080p, 60 hertz, I advise this card. If you are trying to save a buck, you could probably go for the 1660 non-TI in lieu of this card for the 60 FPS. If you want to try to perhaps push the frame rate a little bit, go for this card. If you want anything higher, like 144 hertz on a 1440p monitor, I would definitely advise going for a 2070 because that would allow you to get to that goal a lot better. This has been my first video doing benchmarks and comparisons reviews like this. I try to do it a little try to do it more professionally. I know that reading the values and trying to keep a fast pace, I kind of was tripping over myself when I was reading the values. So I know that that is a point of improvement. But let me know. Please do let me know because I am interested in the feedback of this video because this is kind of what I am aiming for in terms of level of detail. Let me know what you guys think, what can improve, what did I miss, and I'll be glad to hear all that feedback and incorporate it when I do the next video of this sort, which might take a while because yeah, I don't have press review material coming to me to review, for example. This is all the stuff that I happen to get and happen to review. So it won't be very often that this happens, but do let me know, please, your opinion and feedback and what can improve. This has been Addict PC Guy. Like, subscribe, share if you think that this content has been worth your time. If not, well, come back later. Maybe I'll have something better for you. Uh, I'll see you next time.